Okay, so today we're going to be doing a Mobula7 build. This is the Mobula7 V3, the white version, and yeah, so I'm just about to build this. I'll go through some of the components that I've chosen for this, and I wanted to do this as something a little bit bigger than the Mobula6 and get myself outside, flying a bit through the jungle gyms, and yeah, just a bit more outdoor flying and a bit of indoor as well. So just something a bit smaller when it's raining, or if it gets a bit late in the evening, I'll be flying this around the house. So just something that I would like to go. Now, I want to say that this is just the beginning of this build, and I will be transitioning this build into digital from analog. So I'll be doing this as an analog build first, and then I'll show you what I'll be doing at the end, my plans for this in the future. I'll be changing this into a digital build, so stick around to the end so you can see that, and I'll get through and start building this as the analog version. So we'll show you a little bit of the flight video now, so you'll see it here. Alright, so a little bit of light footage here of the build that I'll be going through, and this is the analog build, of course, as you can see, and it flies quite well, even on the 13,500 kV motors, 1102, so a little bit heavy, but yeah, it seems to be okay with the size of the props, which are the HQ 40mm 3-blade props. I did try the 2-blade props, but I didn't find that it gave enough grip. Cornering and everything, it was much more quiet, and yeah, it still flew quite well, but I just found that the 3-blade prop just gave it a bit more, I don't know, control through the cornering and everything like that, so I enjoyed that a bit more. So yeah, it flies decent, not too bad. I'm not too sensitive to weight, so to speak, so some people 1 or 2 grams, especially racers, would feel it quite a lot. For me, I'll show you the weight of this a bit later, is on the heavier side, but yeah, I still have fun. I don't know, as you can see, I'm just doing a bit of the flips and rolls and things like that through this tree here, but yeah, just a bit of fun. So still does quite nice freestyle, as you can see there. Anyhow, onto the build. Okay, so we're back here now, and I'm just gonna go through all the components. I have them all inside this box here, so I've already prepared them. I'll go through each of those that I've chosen, or the things that I've reused from previous builds, and start installing it. So, I'm NampM, let's get into it. Alright, so let's just jump straight into it. We have a few components here. I'll take it out of the box. I've just put it in here to prepare for this video. Just makes it a bit easier to kind of organize it in this box. So, got the camera there already mounted. Got some propellers here, we'll go through that. Antenna. And that's it for now. I do have a few other things here as well, just a few screws in this box. I like these boxes here that HappyModel give for their components. Makes it easier just to keep things contained, and I reuse them just to store the spare parts and things that I take off or replace with other quads and stuff. So yeah, I really like these things. Alright, so I've got the frame here. This is the V3 version, and I kind of identify this V3 version based off these motor mount kind of spokes here. So it's got this V kind of shape, and I think the V4 doesn't have that and the V2 doesn't, but the V3 does. I kind of identify this when I see it online with these spokes, and yeah, it kind of is quite nice, and I wanted to build this out of this. So anyhow, I've got this here. Onto the motors. I think this is one of the important things about a build of a whip. So we have here is the HappyModel. This is the EX1102, and the kV is 13,500. So I've chosen these motors because it is a low kV for this build. I'll be running this as a 1S analog, and I think it might be a little bit low, but because I'm building this as a transition build, I want to fly it as a analog quad in the first place, and then start moving it to the digital version. But yeah, you'll see why I chose this 13,500. I guess a couple of reasons is it is the highest kV for the 1102 motors. It is heavier for this build, but it will make more sense later when you see the end of this video. But I wanted these because they do actually provide quite a bit of thrust. So I just wanted to use these, and yeah, if it doesn't work out well for the 1S build, then hopefully when we start working towards a digital one, which will be a 2S build, might be a bit more powerful. So I'll give these a go and see how it flies. Onto the flight controller. So here I have the HappyModel. Get this out. Here I have the HappyModel X12. It is the ELRS version of it. So it does have the ceramic antenna here. It does have the 12 amp rated ESCs, which is why it's called the X12. It has an onboard VTX, which goes up to 400 milliwatt. So this is an all-in-one with a VTX board, and I would want to use this. I like higher I like higher amp rated ESCs because they are more durable and more resilient to high current flow. When we do things like turtle mode and the props get stuck, the motors jam up, it doesn't blow out as easily. So I do have some other ones that are 5 amp ESCs, and yeah, they seemingly die quite easily when you're in those sort of situations. So anyhow, this is the HappyModel X12 and it will be going into this build. Onto the camera, we do have a Runcam Nano 2. This is a bit of an old camera. I pulled this one out straight from a Tiny Hawk 2, so I'm just reusing this because I have it on hand. Didn't want to buy another camera. I thought I'd just reuse this one. So the Tiny Hawk, if you're interested, it did die, and yeah, I just wanted to reuse it, the camera here. So I kind of used old parts from different quads. It did last quite a while, the Tiny Hawk 2. I did bash that around for about a year. It was a quad that I started learning on, so I really enjoyed that quad, and yeah, the camera is still good in it. It was ESC that kind of eventually went out. I think it was actually 2 of the ESCs, but we have the camera now, so we can use this just to save some money. Here I have a few spare things that I will be using. I have a BT2 battery plug that I'll be using on this. The original screws for the stack or the flight controller are these long ones here, and I'll measure it and I'll put it up on the screen right now. Not sure what it is. I think it might be about 8 mils, but I will be reusing these ones from a separate build. I think this came from a Mobula7. They're a bit shorter and I don't need the length on it, and you'll see why later. Okay, so the first thing that I want to get into this build is the motors. So let's get them straight on. I don't know what the directions are on these yet. I believe they've marked them. Let's see if I can find it again. There you go. It has a red dot on these. So you can see on this one it has a red dot, but these ones don't have them. So I think we'll put them, the ones with the dots, diagonal to each other. Like this. And then the ones without the dots, diagonal that way. I think that's how they've kind of marked them, so that they're either meant to be rotating clockwise or anti-clockwise. I don't think it matters at all. These are brushless motors, so direction doesn't matter in which way you install them. It's just a matter of changing the direction in Betaflight later in software. So it doesn't matter so much. I'll go through that in the configuration anyway, so just to check the way that these motors are spinning in the right direction. But yeah, just so that we might be getting in the right chance at the fact that they are in the right positions, I'll be putting it diagonal to each other. So let's do that now. Okay, so on the X12, it does have the terminals for the battery there. I'll turn it over here and you will see that. I'm not sure if you can see this. I don't have my macro lens adapter on at the moment, but I can see here it says GND, which is ground, and then over here it says bat, so that would be the battery and the ground, and we'll wire them up. I'll wire them from underneath though, so it will be like this for the red on bat, and then the ground will be the black one here. So I'll get onto that now. Okay, so the way that I like to do this is, hopefully we can get this going, is the battery leads will be coming out the back of the bottom here. So I'll be getting my soldering iron and I'll be tacking this on here. So hopefully I can get some heat onto the board first to get the pad nice and warm, and then I will add this on top of there. So once it's a little bit heated on there, I might heat the wire as well, and then join them together. Because there's residual heat, they should flow together much quickly. They should flow together much more easily. Alright, so the power lead of the positive wire is on. Now I'll do the ground. There we go. Okay, so I inspected the ground wire there off camera and it doesn't look like it's on quite nicely actually, but I wanted to get it much more secure, so I'm just going to redo that one again. Alright, so I gave it a bit more time there so that the solder can flow, and I think we've got a much better connection there, so I'm just going to check that off camera again. Now that we have the power leads installed on the flight controller, let's get it onto the frame. So front being over here, just going to pass this through like this, and you'll notice that there are a couple of arrows here that denote the direction of the flight controller. It doesn't matter so much which direction you put it. You can change it in software afterwards in Betaflight, but I do want to have the ceramic antenna on this side at the front, and also the VTX antenna connector here, so that then I can route the antenna back this way. So I'm just going to put it in this direction. Okay, so you can see that now that I've got the flight controller down and the rubber grommets all the way to the bottom, I guess the plastic part of the frame that actually holds the grommet actually sits flush with the grommet. So I think it's designed that way. Mobula7's, I think, is going to be the frame that they've designed these for and across their range as well, so it works quite nicely there. Of course, if it doesn't fit, if it's too long, then you can cut it as well, cut the plastic down to the right size, but for now it should be okay like this. Just going to plug in the motor wires again. Okay, so the motor wires are in, so let's get on to the next step. Alright, so the next part I'm going to be doing is soldering on the BT2 connector, and I just wanted to show how this will work. I guess with the battery, I'm going to be running a 1S. This is a 300 milliamp hour tattoo battery, high volt, and I use this on my Mobula6. I would like to try it on this one. I'll be buying larger capacity batteries for this one as well, for this Mobula7, but I'll be using this for the meantime. See how it flies, just to get a good feel of it, how long the flight time is, and yeah, just see how it is. And I've already got it, so let's give it a go. So with a BT2 connector I've got here, and I'll be wiring it up like this. So the battery cage here on the Mobula7 V3 frame is a little bit too big. You can see that's not going to work at all. So I like to do this with my batteries, the way I wire it, with the minimal wiring that we can use or can get away with. I like to put the battery in like this. So I slide the battery in forward like this, and for this one anyway, the battery is not going to work to fit like that, but using a small rubber band. This one I got from my kids actually. They're hair ties. They're basically hair ties I get off eBay. Very cheap, very durable as well, and you get, I don't know, 1,000 of them for about 5 or 10 Australian dollars. Very cheap, very useful. So the way I use it here on this frame is put the battery in, wrap it around like that, and then on the other end wrap it around like this, and it holds it in quite nicely. So whoops, not like that. I like to get it up like this, so it cradles the battery like this and it holds it quite nicely in there. So if that doesn't work, if one isn't enough, go for two. It holds it in quite nicely there, and it doesn't add that much weight either. That's what I like about it. So it is quite snug in there, like it's actually holding quite tightly. I have to tug it quite a lot, and it holds it against the frame there, so it reduces the vibrations that it's going to give into it. So that's how the battery is going to sit. Now with the connector, I would like to connect it like this, but I think that's not going to work because the ground side of a BT2 connector is the round side. So I learned this off Aaron Ciardi. He says round is ground. I think I'm not sure if he coined it. I'm sure others have called it that as well before him, but it's an easy way to remember about a BT2 connector. The round side is ground. Round is ground. So it's not going to work that way, but easy enough. If I turn the battery around so that the label is on the other side, then I can install it this way with the ground side matching with the round side. Anyhow, I'll be getting onto that like this, and I'll be installing this. So when I run it, when I actually use or about to fly, I'll push the battery in quite deep, and the connector would be about this long here, and that allows me to slide it back and then connect it in. I won't connect it now because, well, I haven't wired it up yet, but that's how it will work. Alright, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to start this by evening up these wires here because I'll be connecting the BT2 connector like so, and this allows it to be, I guess, coming at 180 degrees or coming directly backwards from the wire direction. So I'll be tacking on the battery red terminal here, the positive terminal on this side, and the ground onto this side. I'll then start putting heat shrink on the whole thing as well, and also putting a bit of E6000. I like to put a glob of that onto it before I put the heat shrink on, and I'll show you how I do that, just to keep the terminals apart and stops them from shorting. So I'll get onto that afterwards, but right now I'm just going to even these up. Alright, while I'm at it, I'm just going to strip this as well. And I won't need that much, it's only going to be just about 2 millimeters worth. And I'll tin these up as well. Right, so those terminals are tinned up, and now I'll get the BT2 connector tinned up. So I'm just going to use these helping hands just to hold the connector, and what I like to do is, and I'll need pliers for this, so just going to grab them. Okay, so I'm just going to turn these out, so you'll see that the terminals are kind of flat side facing in one of the directions here, but I like to turn them so that they're facing on the outside. So it's easy enough, you can just hold it with a pair of pliers and just slowly turn them. So just grab them and twist, and they should just start turning out like that. So that's one side, and I'll turn the other one. Okay, so what that does is it allows for more solder to be sitting on the flat side here and on this side, on the outsides of the terminal, just so that I can get the connector on the outsides more easily without the possibility of it connecting on between them. So I'll give that a go now. I'll start tinning these up on the outside. So that's tinned up now, and I can try and get it onto this connector here. So remembering that round is ground, I'll turn these around like that. Not sure if this will work with these helping hands. I'm not sure if it's long enough. Might have to turn the whole thing around. Let's give that a try. Okay, that might work. And yes, I'll just connect it like this, and with the red terminal on that side. So I'll give that a go. Okay, so now the positive terminal is on with, I think, a solid connection, but I'll check that off camera in a sec. And now I'll get the negative terminal on, so the ground. Right, I don't think this is on with the right angle, but I'll check it to see if it's going to work. Yep, I think that should work. I'll get this out of the way just to show you. So you can see that the BT2 connector is now pointing in this direction, and it's soldered on like that there. Not the best solder job, but I've done this for quite a few of my whips now, and it seems to be okay. I haven't had that many issues of this coming apart at all, and the way that I'm going to glue it and also heat shrink it kind of holds it all nicely together, pretty tight. And the way that I hold onto the wires here, it doesn't tug on or cause any stress onto the terminal ends here. So when I pull it off, I'm holding the whole BT2 connector and pulling it off the battery. So I'm just going to put a bit of heat shrink in between here and then put the glue, as I mentioned earlier, and then I'll put heat shrink over the whole thing and then shrink it. So I'll do that now. Okay, so what I like to do is get a bit of heat shrink in between there just to separate it, and kind of just like to squeeze it in there, just a small piece. And this is all going to be inside the full heat shrink tube anyway, that covers the whole thing. But you can see there that keeps that separated and minimizes the chances of them shorting. So I'm just going to snip it on the end here, and it leaves a little bit of that heat shrink on it. So now I'll just heat it up a bit just to get it to shrink inside there and tighten up so it's stuck in between. And then I'll prepare a bit of shrink tubing, heat shrink over the whole connector. Not sure if this will fit. Maybe I've got a bigger one. The other stuff that I've got is too big now. Kind of had a feeling that this would happen. Yeah, these aren't big enough, and this is too big. So what I'm going to do is a bit of a trick I saw. I think it's Ian on Mads Tech. He did this. So I'll measure up the size that I'll need and a bit longer, so about that much of it. I'll cut it off. And this part doesn't matter so much because I'll cut off the excess later anyway. So that's gonna sit on about that much, hanging off the end there, right? So just excess is gonna be out here, but that's okay. So what he did show me, or show people on a live stream, I think, was he just puts pliers in there and stretches it. And so just twisting and stretching, just slowly, just taking time. No need to go too hard on it, because when you do try and stretch it too much, it does tear and then it's useless. So just take your time. You can stretch this quite a bit actually, so just keep going, switching it on the end as you saw I did there, and you can get this over quite easily there. You can see it there and it will work quite nicely. So it goes on like that, and I'll shrink it. But before I do, like I said, E6000, this helps with actually keeping that heat shrink that separates the terminals from staying in there, but also it keeps this on that as well, so it doesn't actually allow it to come off. Alright, so just putting a bit of E6000 adhesive on there. So I just like to put it just around the terminal there. Not too much, it doesn't need that much. And a bit on that white part of the BT2 connector as well. So once that's on, I might stretch this out a bit more. Okay, and once I've got it all stretched, I'll carefully put it over, like so. And I'd like to keep the end of the BT2 connector exposed there, of course, so that you can plug the battery in. Once that's on, I can shrink it. Just shrinking that will obviously encase the E6000 glue in there as well. And you can see there, it's all shrunken in, and it has a bit of excess on the end here, so that's quite easily solved. I'll cut that at the end. I'll leave that actually overnight. I won't cut it off now, but I'll cut it off later in the next day. I just wake up, or when I'm working on this next, I just snip off the end here. But I'm leaving it on because there's that excess E6000 glue that oozes out a bit on the end here, and I kind of want that just so that I know that inside it's all glued up inside on the terminals, protecting it from shorting. And there you go. So there might be a bit too much excess of the heat shrink on this lip here, but that's okay. It's easily snipped off, or using, oh there you go, just kind of peeled it off there and exposing the terminal. Alright, so the battery lead is on now with the BT2 connector. Okay, so this build is almost done already, and the last thing that we're going to have to do is get the camera on. So this is a Runcam Nano 2. I got this off the Tiny Hawk, and the Tiny Hawk has died, so now I'm just going to use it for this one, and I will be putting it on like this. So this is a TPU canopy that I got off Thingiverse, and this is the one, I think one of the versions that doesn't have the multiple holes on the ends. I think I may have modified my own to have 3 holes here just to change the camera angle, because you can actually pull it back and forth and adjust it like that. But I'm just going to use this one, and yeah, it seems like I really like this canopy. It does expose the board a bit when it's on. It doesn't protect it, so I did design and also print a sheet that is 25 by 25 that covers the board, that has holes in it for ventilation. I don't have that printed at the moment. I will be printing it, and I'll try and put it up and show you right now once this is all done. But for now, I'm just going to be using this double-sided tape to protect the camera from hitting the board. So before I do that, I'm going to put on the BTX antenna, like so. So I'm just going to plug that on. It's just a UFL. There you go, just a pop, and it's on. And now the camera needs to be plugged in. So the camera plug is on this side, just on the other side of the UFL connector. I'll take the battery out. Just put the battery on just to test it out, but I'll push this up since it's not screwed in yet, and the battery leads should have enough slack for me to get to the camera. It's a bit hard to get it off these standoffs or the stack plastic tubes. I'll just push that up a little bit just so I can get to that plug. Right, there we go, and this is a camera plug. I'll just be putting it in. Okay, so then once that's on, I'll push the flight controller back on to the board, onto the frame, and mount it in. So I'll just grab the screws now. Alright, so there we go. We've got the camera on now. Bit of double-sided tape under there just to hold the... I may as well move this and try and get it so that the VTX antenna can be out of the way of the propellers. It's a bit hard there. I might maybe zip tie this together so that the VTX antenna doesn't go into the propellers there. So I do have another way of handling this as well, is where I cut a slit inside this TPU and pass the antenna through that slit, so there's no chance of it coming through. So I might give that a go before I test fly this, but yeah, that's one way that I protect the antenna. So I'm just going to try and slide this in. There you go. That little bit of double-sided tape with the foam, or the thickness of the double-sided tape, is just going to protect the camera if it hits into the flight controller there. So there we go, and the last thing we'll need to do is the propellers. So this flight controller is configured so that the propellers spin outwards. This HappyModel X12 I've already used in another build. I've pulled it out just so I could put it into this one, but yeah, I know that it is on the spinning out propeller configuration, so I'll put them on spinning out. Alright, so the propeller's on, and I think I've forgotten to mention that these propellers are the 40mm propellers, and they are the HQ prop propellers. So HQ prop 3-blade, of course, and they are 40mm. I think they're 1.6 inch. And yeah, I'm just going to give these a go with these 13,500 kV motors and see how it flies. I'm not expecting great performance, not much thrust, and I might have to give it a lot of throttle. I do have 19,000 kV HappyModel motors as well, 0802s. So if these aren't too good on this frame in this configuration, I'll put them on and I'll show you it here. But I'm just going to give this a go. So just check out some flight videos right now. Alright, and here we go. Just to take off. Awesome. Alright, here we go, and oh my, what the, anyway, where did that tree come from? Here's a bit of a flight after I put this build together in the park. I did test it out on the bench and in the house a little bit, and I found that I was quite lucky with the motor orientation, the order that I put it in. So those red dots turned out well, and it was actually the right position. I didn't have to adjust anything. It was the props out direction and also the right or I guess direction of the motors on each of those corners. So here you go, just extra flight footage that I was doing around this park here, and a bit of freestyle. So I might put another section of flight as well on in a different park, and there you go, a bit of durability testing, and you'll see a bit later my thoughts on the durability of this thing. So you might get an idea of what I'm going to say after this, but yeah, you'll see. So as you can see, just ripping it around this little park, and it was a very windy day. So even with the Mobula7, with the, I guess, the props and the control of this, there was quite a bit of gust in this day, and you can't see it of course, but it was pushing me around quite a bit. So I was struggling to control it, pushing it against the wind, and it was all in all directions as well. So there you go, more durability testing there, but it gets back up, should be okay. And yeah, so it yeah, does all right. I might put another flight footage in here as well, just to give you a feel of how it goes in different areas, and it was on a different day as well. But yeah, I just wanted to give a bit more of that. But if you don't want to watch it, skip ahead, get to the end, and I've got a bit more details on my plans for this build. Jeez, where did that bush come from? Alright, I'm just gonna show a reel of the crashes that I had, just to show a bit of that durability. And yeah, I smack it in quite a lot into hard obstacles. So right there, straight into that pole. Up again, seems alright. Oh, right there, straight into that pole. And I have no idea what happened there, but I must have hit something. Up again, here you go. Tried to get through that gap, nope, didn't work. Up again. And what the hell was I doing? I'm not sure. Anyway, so you can see it gets up quite well. Now here, so I've got this flight that's in the backyard of my parents' house, and I like this area quite a lot. As you can see, there's a lot of obstacles and places for me to get around, so I really enjoy this. My backyard is not like this, but yeah, this one just has a lot of areas that I get to cover, and a bit of speed as well. As you can see, I can rip it through the grass there, around the poles of this pergola, and it's just a great time in here. I really enjoyed this. It was a little bit windy, but the way the house is structured and the way the walls are, it really contains it, so the wind wasn't affecting me too much. But there, you can see it does quite well. So this is 13,500 kV motors on the 40mm props HQ, and it does rip quite well. Even for the weight, I don't have any issues with this. A few people would not, I think, find it heavy and everything. But I don't know what happened there. Got stuck on the pole, but recovered well. But yeah, it does nicely. The freestyle and everything, really enjoy it. So one thing I forgot to mention while recording this video is the runtime for the batteries. So as mentioned, I was running the 300 milliamp hour Tattoo batteries, high volt, and for a full charge, I've been getting indoors about 3 minutes, just a bit over 3 minutes, maybe 3:05, and outdoors I get about 2 minutes and 30 seconds, around there. And it really depends on how much I'm really giving the throttle. So it seems to be pretty good, I think, out of the small battery and the size of the quad. So I think if I run it with maybe 450 milliamp hour, it would give me maybe about 4.5 minutes of decent flight time. So I'm really, I wouldn't say impressed, I actually more so say I think I really enjoy the amount of flight time. 3 minutes is good, or 2.5 even, with a lot of freestyle and hard punches, I think is quite enough. So you know, I think this is a really good build for this 1S batteries that I'm running right now. Obviously when I jump over to 2S, it's going to be a bit different, and I'll give you a bit more stats on that when I start flying that with the whole digital build. Alright, I'm just going to weigh everything, and I'm doing this a bit backwards. I forgot to do it earlier, and basically I tore this thing all apart again just to do the weighing of each of the components. So I'm just going to do that now, place every item onto here as part of the build, and yeah, I'll just put the calculations for each of the parts on the screen as we go along. So I think the first ones we'll go through are the small bits here. So we'll go through these are the motor screws. So the motor screws there,
0.55 with the motors as well, all 4 of them. Comes to 12.58 with propellers, 14.13 antenna, 14.61. These are the stack screws that hold in the flight controller. There you go, 14.75. The flight controller with the gummies on it, and also my battery lead and the BT2 connector. I've already got them all in there, so I can't really give you the weight of each of these, but I might put the specs of what they tell you on the listing. So putting that on, we get to 21.4. The camera and this TPU camera mount and the canopy, get that on. That's 26.19. This is a protector for the flight controller. I like to put that on just underneath the canopy, between the canopy and the flight controller, and protects the electronics. Putting that on. 26.51, and finally we have the frame, so might try and balance that on somehow, maybe like this, and altogether we get 32.09, so maybe 32.08. So a few of you have probably fallen off your chairs and either that or have turned off or changed to another video. That's quite a heavy build for a Mobula7 or a Whoop, tiny Whoop. But yeah, that's what mine has come up to, and it comes down to, I think the camera is quite heavy for this, and also the flight controller as well. The motors, as I mentioned, it will be the digital build, so I'll be putting a Cadex Vista on there, which will need the 2S batteries on there, so that's why I've chosen it, and that's why it's a bit more heavier instead of the 0802 motors. But there you go, this is a weight dry, and yeah, it depends on the battery that you put on. And with the Tattoo 300 milliamp hour battery as well at 8.06 grams, all up weight you'll see on the screen here, which is about 40 grams total.
Okay, so there we go. I've bashed this around, as you saw, quite a bit, and I'd like to just say again that I'm quite impressed with the durability of this frame, the Mobula7 V3. I've taken many hits, as you saw, into very hard structures very fast, and it hasn't shown any sort of like structural damage. It hasn't had any broken kind of whip guards here or the arms, nothing yet, and I hope it stays that way. But I've taken, yeah, this thing straight into the concrete holes and all sorts of things, as you saw, and it's still holding up, and the props hasn't been damaged yet. The only thing really is, I think on this one here, a slight chip, but otherwise everything else seems to be okay. So yeah, or maybe this here, you can see a bit, it's bent, but that's not a problem anyway. Anyhow, so I really like this frame, I really like this build, and yeah, I'll keep flying with this analog setup for a little bit more. And yeah, so what I'll tell you now, and what I mentioned earlier in the video, is I'm gonna start taking this thing through a bit of a transition. So I wanted to fly this thing with a bit of analog, just to see how the weight goes and how it actually performs. But yeah, I mentioned I did want to take this to a digital build. So this is the first step, taking it to analog, fly it around, see how it goes. And I quite like it, even with the low kV motors on it. But what I'm going to be doing is turning this into a 2S build with digital. Now, I'm actually going to put this into it. Okay, so what I've got here, and what I'm going to be putting into this build, is a Cadex Vista. So here is a Vista, and the camera that comes with it is the Nebula Pro. It is not the Nebula Pro Nano. I've actually just ordered the Nebula Pro Nano camera to put onto this, and so I can get it lighter. So I think this one's about 6.3 grams. I'm not exactly sure. I'll put it up on the screen here, but it is a bit heavy. So I'm thinking of getting the Nano Pro, sorry, the Nebula Nano Pro, which is I think about 3 grams or 3.5 grams. So it's going to be quite a bit lighter than this one, so just to save a bit of weight, and I'll be putting this Cadex Vista into here. So what I'll be doing also is following Dax Neal, I think, Dax's channel, and also what's his name, Nick Burns. He also did it as well. And what Dax calls it is the Mobula. And what he did is take the Calyx Vista and take it down to a naked vista. So basically taking the heat sinks off. So this part here, the middle parts, the heatsink, and also the bottom one. So I'll be taking them apart, taking them all off and cleaning up the boards, and then putting it onto this frame here, turning this into a DJI digital build. So he calls it the Mobula, so I'll call it the Mobula 2. And also the antenna, I might replace this with one of these with the whip antenna. I think it might work, same frequency, seems to be okay. There's the ORT antenna as well, which Nick Burns used, but I can't find that anywhere online, or at least anywhere in Australia. So I'm going to try this whip antenna, but if not, I might even just try and shorten this lead here, save some weight on this, and also take this tube off, and yeah, keep this antenna that was original with the Calyx Vista. So I'm going to be doing that. I'll be transferring all of this digital system into this build here and turning it into a Mobula. So that's what I wanted to do. Hopefully it comes up quite light, because I think but Nick Burns got it to 39 grams. Not sure if I can get it to that, given that I think the flight controller is a little bit heavier than the one that he was using. But yeah, it still, I think, should be okay, given that he was using 10,000 kV motors and I'll be using here, which is the 13,500 kV motors. So you should have enough power, and it should still be a lot of fun, especially with a much more clearer image. So that's what I'll be doing. So stay tuned. If you're not subscribed yet, please subscribe so you can get those updates. But yeah, I hope that it will turn out well, and I hope you like it, and it's something that we can look forward to. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something, enjoyed it, saw how it flew, something to inspire any future builds. So I thank you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.